Alright, Archer log entry 3022-158. Pilot Lars Walker, location still on Bone Norman as always, near an old research station in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Time of day, late morning. Weather, the usual crazy wind that makes it impossible to hear anything, and it's kicking up quite a bit of dust, so visibility isn't great, but sufficient. We picked up a strange sensor reading in the old research center. It could be one of those werewillow trees again, but this one looks a bit larger, so we decided that I'd take the mech out to check it out. Maybe it's some old tech that they were working on here, who knows? Maybe it's something really cool that finally managed to get Bone Norman into the news for a change. I could definitely use some excitement. Anyways, I just arrived at the research station and I'm walking down the main street. I'm getting closer to the radar blip. Should be on my left after I pass that white building. So I'll keep walking down the street until I get there. Fingers crossed that it's something interesting.
This is Kurita Special Forces Commander. We've got the Archer in our sights. He's fallen for the trap. Hetzer, move out. Tears of the Dragon, jump! The Archer chooses to shoot its medium lasers at the tank and will reserve a stomp for the infantry. So we have to look up medium lasers. Heat 3, damage 5, short range 1 to 3. So we are at a range of 1 from the Hetzer. So that would put us in short range. As we stated in the previous video, the pilot is a green pilot. So it's a gunnery 5, piloting 6. And how this translates into game is gunnery skill 5 means your starting roll is 5, and from there you add or subtract modifiers. Now, since the Archer has walked, it's a +1 to the hit roll, so you're now at 6 to hit, but that's not all. Then you also have to look at range. Now, fortunately, we're in short range, so nothing, so we're still at +6. You're still at 6 to hit, but the enemy has moved. The enemy Hetzer only moved 1 hex though, so move 0 to 2 hexes means a modifier of 0. So we're still at 6 to hit. So one laser got a 5, the other laser got a 7, so one of the lasers hits. Now we have to determine where the laser hit. So we're looking at the ground combat table, rolled a 7, and now this corresponds to the front. Because the rules for hitting vehicles have changed a lot in between the different rule revisions, you want to make sure you all agree on what books you're using. We are using the Total Warfare rules for hit locations. Now it's time for the Tears of the Dragon to move. In Battletech lore, the Tears of the Dragon are Kurita mech warriors that have lost their mechs and have become dispossessed, and have now been written off as dead and have been sent on a suicide mission from which they are not expected to return, in this case to attempt to destroy an Archer as an infantry platoon. Losing your mech in Kurita is such a dishonor that only death can salvage the situation. In fact, even if you actually win, you'll just be sent, either executed or sent on another suicide mission. So there is actually no way to recover. For game purposes and using the Compendium rules, we are using the SRM Jump Platoon, which has strength 21. It's also been trained in anti-mech techniques, and it's considered a 4-5 unit for Total Warfare purposes. Now, this unit is going to choose to make a leg attack, as it's in the same hex, so it gets a chance to make the special attack where they try to climb and plant explosives into the various cracks and gaps in a mech's armor to try to do critical damage to actuators and other leg components. In order to figure out what your odds of success are, you have to start with the anti-mech training, which in this case is a 5, and then you would add penalties based on the decrease in the number. In some versions of the rules, you don't use anti-mech training, you instead have some base numbers that you modify based on the number of troops. It turns out in the Compendium rules, there's a different set of rules for it, but it comes out to the same number in this case versus Total Warfare rules. So it turns out that the total to hit for this strength of an SRM jump unit turns out to be a 7. Then you have to add penalties for movement, etc. The penalty for a jump is +3 to hit, and the penalty for target motion here for the archer's movement is +1. So that's +4 on top of the 7, which is an 11, but I had already rolled an 11. That's a hit, so now we have to check the kick location table because that's what you use for a successful leg attack. Even though my unit is placed behind the mech, it's considered a front arc leg attack. So 1, 2, 3 is right leg, 4, 5, 6 is left leg. We hit the left leg, so we do 4 points of damage, and then now we have to check for crits. So to do that, we roll 2d6, and 7 or less is not a crit, and higher than that means there's a certain number of crits depending on how well the roll went. Well, that's just one crit. A 9 is one crit, so now we know there's a crit, but now we need to determine what the location of the crit is. So you roll 1d6 because it's down in the leg, and it hit the upper leg actuator. This is Kurita Commander. Now it's time to hit the mech with our AC-20 and take it down. AC-20, fire. Now we have to look up the AC-20's characteristics. 7 heat, 20 damage, and 1 to 3 for short range. We're in short range because we're at distance 1. Our gunnery skill is 3 because we have an elite crew. We moved or walked cruise speed, so we have a +1 for a penalty. So we have a 4 as our modified roll. We're at short range, so nothing. So we're still at 4 or better. The enemy moved 4 hexes, so that's +1. So we have to roll a 5 or better to hit. And we rolled a 6. So we just kind of hit. Now we have to figure out where we will hit. So we roll our location. That's 9. And it is a very sweet hit on the left leg. Now this hit the previously damaged leg, doing 20 points of damage, which takes off most of the armor, but does not yet go internal. So now, because a mech that takes 20 points of damage has to make a piloting roll, Lars, the pilot, has to roll. The archer gets a physical attack phase. The tank can't because it should have declared a charge earlier, but the archer can either punch or kick, and the archer has chosen to kick or stomp the infantry. Now this is where the rules differ when we want to choose our effects on kicking and stomping on infantry. Depending on whether you use the Battletech Compendium rules or the Total Warfare rules, well, we do 5 tons of damage per 1 point per 5 tons per kick. So that's 14 points from a kick from an archer. It can kick infantry in the same hex or in the forward hex, the forward arcs, with a +3 to hit modifier. Now, in one set of rules, it's based on piloting skills. Another set on fixed base starting roll. It comes about roughly similar, but in any case, we just rolled an 11, so it kind of doesn't matter, we hit. And the damage value is a little tricky. So normally we would do 14 damage. We have to divide by 10 because the kick is a ballistic weapon. So it's 1.4. You round that up to 2, but infantry in open terrain takes double damage. I'm going to assume round up occurs before doubling, so this will do 4 infantry points of damage. Now, any mech that takes 20 or more damage points in one phase, like the archer, has to roll a piloting roll. Lars has a piloting skill of 6, and because it's from damage, the piloting skill check comes from taking damage. You have to do a +1 modifier on it, so you have to roll 7 or better with any additional modifiers. Now, If an actuator has been damaged, depending on what actuator it is, you would roll extra, but that doesn't come into effect until the next turn. Unfortunately, the archer pilot has failed his piloting roll, and the archer falls down.